Those eyes disguise our hide. Bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. I am your host, Matthew M., and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome, everybody, to episode 8. Got a great episode for you today. We're going to be talking about step 8. We're going to be talking about my favorite moment of the week, or my kind of multiple moments of the week, as well as answering more questions. So before we get into anything else, I got to give a huge thank you to this episode's sponsor, Etc. by Emily. If you are looking for any kind of job or you need event staffing for a party or an event, please check out her website below in the description. Also have to give a huge shout out to our VIP supporters. These are the people that are supporting us on Patreon, and they are Shar, Clint, and Alex. Big shout out to you guys. You guys are what's helping grow this podcast and helping us reinvest in this business. If you're interested in becoming a VIP supporter of the Clean and Filthy podcast, please head over to www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. And in the top right corner, where all the social media tabs are, you can click on Patreon and you can make a donation there. For everybody who supports, you will get one of these awesome Clean and Filthy podcast stickers to help display and help us grow. So big shout out to our VIP supporters. Thank you very, very much. Before we go any further, I have to give another huge thank you to everybody out there supporting this podcast. We cracked 200 downloads, so I really appreciate the support. You know, everybody who's live on YouTube right now, watching this episode live. For those who don't know, we broadcast via live stream every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time on YouTube. And then we put all of the episodes up for download wherever you get your podcasts from later that night. So if you are wanting to participate in the live stream and you're currently listening to this at a later date, head on over to YouTube, 5 p.m. Arizona time every Tuesday. We get a fun group of people in chat commenting, and it's just a fun experience. Also, if you are currently watching on YouTube and you wouldn't mind helping support this channel a little bit, please make sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We're almost able to get a custom URL, so shout out to everybody for their subscriptions on YouTube. As well as, if you wouldn't mind, head over to wherever you consume podcasts from. Follow the Clean and Filthy podcast, download our episodes. Helps boost our numbers up. Our numbers get boosted. We get moved up, different lists and on directories. And it helps us be able to carry a message out to more people, which is what we're trying to do here. So also, before we go any further, huge thank you to Alice in Wonderland and Valentino Khan and Mad Decent Records for allowing us to use the incredible song Anything for the theme music for the Clean and Filthy podcast. For information about how to download that song, it is all listed below in the description. Before we get into our first segment, I want to take a second to explain what we are and what we do here at the Clean and Filthy podcast. So again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery, and this is the Clean and Filthy podcast. We are a 12-step recovery-based podcast where we talk about all the things that us recovering addicts go through on a daily basis, working steps, working traditions, spiritual principles we add in our lives, and just have some fun while we're at it. Because one of the most beautiful things about recovery is that it is incredibly fun. Never would have realized that prior to getting into recovery. But we are not a 12-step meeting directly. I will not be speaking from a point of authority. I will not be giving my opinion on any specific fellowship or any specific meeting because I want to make sure that I stay in line with the traditions. And so I will not be referencing a fellowship one way or the other, or giving a recommendation for a treatment center or a sober living. But if you have informations about those things, if you need to get to a meeting, if you're looking to find somebody, for sponsorship, or you have questions about, what sober living or what treatment center is good, please contact me directly. And I'll be more than happy to share that information with you because at the end of the day, I just want to be able to help more people, learn about recovery, learn about what we go through in addiction, and really get on that path to recovery. So if you have those questions, please hit me up directly. You can email me at matthew@cleanandfilthypodcast.com or contact me on any social media. I check all of them. So again, this is just my experience, strength, and hope with a little bit of my opinion. But at the end of the day, we really just want to be a community for people that have maybe questions about recovery, questions about addiction, just are curious, or for anybody who's been impacted by addiction in any way, shape, or form. And that's most of us, these days. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do. Hopefully, if this is your first time, welcome. Stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. And if you do, please share this podcast on social media, with your friends, family, strangers, whatever. Just, whatever it takes to get out there. If you think that this might be able to help somebody, please send them on over. We love having new listeners, new faces, whether you're in recovery or not. We're really just trying to broaden the perspective on recovery and what it's like to be clean and, living a life in recovery. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do, just so everybody's on the same page. And now let's get into our first segment.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
That's right, y'all. It is time for our first segment entitled R&D, Recovery and Development. So we are back in the lab. This is the time every single week where we discuss a step, tradition, concept, or spiritual principle directly regarding 12-step recovery. Again, not speaking from a point of authority. I'm not speaking from anything other than my own experience, strength, and hope with a little bit of my opinion, which I will point out when it is my opinion. Now, if you're not an addict or you're not in recovery and you're like, why do I need to be listening to these things? Well, the beautiful thing about recovery is that recovery isn't just about drugs. In fact, now that I've gotten a little bit of time in recovery, I realize how little drugs have to do with the disease of addiction, how little that substance has to do with the overall process of recovery. Recovery for me is about growing. It's about changing. It's about learning. It's about becoming a better person. And we do that by working steps, by working traditions, by working concepts, by looking at spiritual principles and implementing them into our lives and living them. So that's what we do in this part of the show. So if you're not an addict, stick around. There might be something that works, and maybe you'll hear something that you like. So we are into episode 8, which means we are on step 8. Now this step, major action step. Salute. This step is well, let's read it first. It says, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Like I said, major action step. Up to this point, we've been focusing on ourselves. We've been focusing on establishing and understanding a higher power and cultivating that relationship. But step 8 is the first opportunity that we really start bringing other people into our recovery. And this could be a very scary thing. It can be a very scary thing, For me, I had a lot of fear about the 8th and ninth step. And now what I will say is, this is another one of those steps where even though we're just talking about the 8th step today, and I'm going to try not to mention anything about the ninth step because, we're going to be going into that next week, sorry. It's still very difficult to separate at times. It's very difficult to separate a 4th and a 5th step, a 6th and a 7th step, an 8th and a ninth step. But what the easiest way to do it is just to read the words that are said there. And that's all we're doing here. We're making a list of all persons we had harmed, and we're becoming willing to make amends to them all. So we're going to get into the list, how we create that, all that. We'll go from there. But one of the things that's beautiful about the 8th step is that we're taking a lot of the same situations that we looked into and we, peeled the onion back on in the 4th step. And then those same type of situations that we looked at in the 6th step and saw how our character defects affected those situations. And now we're looking at them from a different angle. We're looking at them from that angle of harm. And we're going to get into what harm means because we got to define some things before we can really put together this list. This step really allows us to build off that humility that we've been building through the steps, and especially was important in step 7. If you haven't listened to step 7 of or episode 7 of the Clean and Filthy podcast, please make sure you do it because we're talking all about humility there, and that really ties in within step 8. Little bit of a shameless plug, but if you really want to stay up to date, if you've never worked the steps before and you're curious about them, I highly recommend going and listening to the past 7 episodes of the Clean and Filthy podcast, or each one as they come out, so you will stay, in order with this. Because as we talk about, the steps are in order for a reason. They build on each other. They build from that foundation, and we put up walls, and we put up drywall, and we put up ceiling, and then we build a little deck up on top, and that's how this whole process works. So if you don't have any knowledge about what humility really means, employing the spiritual principle of humility in this step might not make much sense at the end of the day. But humility is massively important in this step because it allows us to feel equal to others. And that can be a scary thing, especially when we start looking at the harm that we've caused, especially when we start feeling some of that shame or some of that guilt that maybe we weren't able to completely work through in that 4th step. And we start looking at those things and we start feeling less than. But if we can truly look at ourselves as we really are, then we don't have to feel less than. We can feel equal to others. So the other spiritual principles of this step, I already mentioned humility, willingness. It says it right there in the words of the step. So it's got to be important. Willingness, massively important here. But we got to have honesty as well. And within that honesty, we have to have courage. We got to have compassion. And we got to have open-mindedness. We have to have that humility piece to accept what we have done, regardless of how it makes us look. We have to acknowledge it. We have to honestly look at the people we have harmed, even when it makes us feel some kind of way, especially when it makes us feel some kind of way. Because when we feel that pain, we can grow through it. When we share that pain, it gets lessened. So we have to look at honesty and humility within that. And then we got to look at the willingness. And willingness, we're going to talk about this a little bit further after we start coming up with some elements of harm and things like that. But willingness was a very difficult thing on my 8th and then into my 9th step, which we're going to talk about a whole lot more. And of course, like I said, with the honesty, we have to look at how we harmed people, even if it takes effort, even if we don't realize it at first. Because one of the things that it says within the readings, within the literature, is that, we need to look at however we harm people, whether we meant to or not, what our intention was. And that can be very difficult because it requires us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And then it requires us to not rationalize and not justify things. So we're going to get into this a lot deeper once we get further down into the actual harm definition. One of the most important things is to work an 8th step like there's no 9th step. Like I said on episode 4, we work a 4th step as though there's no fifth step. But come on, y'all. Like, we're humans. Like, it's almost impossible not to worry about that ninth step. It's almost impossible to not be looking at names and putting names on a list and thinking about, oh shit, how am I going to do this? What am I going to say to this person? What? Because that's what we do. You know, if you're an addict like me, I live in fear. I overthink. You know, I was constantly self-sabotaging. All the stuff we talked about in episode 6. And if we haven't worked a true 6th and 7th step up to this point, some of the names that we might need to put on this list might be impossible. They might be impossible, especially for us to do it on our own, to not employ a true faith in our higher power, which again we're gonna go into a little bit more. But one of the things that within that, when we're working that 8th step, is we have to focus on not projecting. Not projecting. How is this amends going to go? What's it going to be like? How is this going to work? What if they don't do this? What if they do this? Those are those type of things that we have to really try to limit. We have to, it says in the literature that projection about actually making amends can be a major obstacle both in making the list and becoming willing. I did that. I was projecting how an amends was going to go, and so it ended up being one of the last people that I added to my list because I was so caught in fear of how it was going to play out or what could possibly be the negative ramifications of it that I was living in denial that I even needed to do it. Thankfully, after praying for some willingness, speaking with my sponsor, that name made it onto the list. So, it's something that we really need to try and temper as much as we can because we are great at concocting, making fear just become this overwhelming tidal wave that we just want to run from. At least if you're anything like me, that was something that I would constantly do. But by being able to pray about it, to ask other, recovering addicts about it, to be able to rely on something greater than ourselves, especially when it comes to needing that willingness and working through that fear. Again, turning fear into faith. When we're able to do that, things become a lot less scary. That fear slowly starts to dissipate. Might take longer for some. Might take longer for certain names on that list. Again, I'm not saying it's an instant thing. But the beautiful thing about this step is that this is a lifelong journey. Because no matter how great we are in recovery, we're still going to make mistakes. We're still going to harm people because we're still human. We're not perfect. Just like we talked about last week with humility, with the 7th step, we are human and we're doing the best we can with what we've got, just like everybody else is. So when those things will come up, which they inevitably will, things will come up in life. We will make mistakes, and that's okay because we're not perfect. We're human. So what do we do with this list? How do we come up with this list? One of the best things to do is to look at the 4th step. Look at the people and the situations and the different names or things that came up on our 4th step. And then we can kind of build off of that. And we can look at, some of those same, how those character defects that on the 6th step start to kind of fit into those same situations that we went over on our 4th step. And we can add to it. So a lot of people will really start off of things within the 4th step. And then we'll grow from there. And it says, we looked at all the people we had harmed. So what is harm? What does harm really mean? Because it says in the literature that it's harm, the harm we caused, regardless of intent. So what does that mean? I mean, admitting to the harm that we caused in our addiction, for a lot of us can be pretty obvious. A lot of the harm that we cause is very apparent. When we look at what harm, physical harm, okay, You physically harm somebody, or emotionally harmed, or mentally harmed, or spiritually harmed. Those are things that can be very apparent. We can see that. Maybe you were stealing money from somebody. You are directly harming their financial situation. Maybe you got in a fight with somebody when you blacked out and you put them in the hospital. But there can be other elements within harm that can be a little bit more difficult to realize. At least they were for me. Because some of the people on my list weren't people that I had done anything to. Because so much of my addiction was, especially like in the earlier parts of my active addiction, not towards the end, because towards the end, a lot of people were getting harmed pretty much every single time I opened my eyes each day, whether they were businesses, people directly, people indirectly, institutions. A lot of people were getting harmed. But in the beginning of my addiction, before things got really, really bad, when I had the job and I had the cars and I had the house and I had the money, I was living in that denial perspective of, I'm only harming myself. That's it. Nobody else is getting harmed by me. I'm just harming myself. But when I really look back at those things, when I look back at how selfish I was being, when I look back at how little I cared about the well-being or the emotions or the thoughts of anybody else, then I start to realize the amount of harm that I caused. It could be a friendship. And I one of the people on my list was a friend that I'd had for 10 plus years. And it reached out and it reached out and it reached out. And this was towards the end of things when my active addiction got really dark and really bad. And I just never responded. And finally, I got a message from her where she just said, you know what? Don't ever contact me again. Just don't do it. Because I've been worried about you and I care about you. And you care so little about this friendship that you won't even respond to a Facebook message? Don't ever contact me again. And that's the type of harm that so often, for an addict like me, I didn't realize. Again, so much of my selfishness throughout my active addiction wasn't direct selfishness. It wasn't direct, I care more about me, fuck you, it wasn't that. But it was that being so self-centered and the effect that it had on people, I was oblivious to it. I was selfish. I was ignorant in my level of selfishness. And I was especially ignorant in my level of what what my selfishness did to people. So there were people on my list that, I really had to think about. I really had to think about and remove that self-centered perspective on and really put myself in their shoes. And there were some people that I just directly asked. I was like, do you think I owe you an amends? And that isn't the best way to do it. But there were some people that, I didn't really 100% know if I did. Because some people's perspective on harm is different than what mine is. I might not even have an idea that I harmed somebody. I might not even realize it. Because it says right there, regardless of our intent, we need to make amends for the harm we caused. And one of the things that we always have to do is we have to avoid rationalizing. And we have to avoid looking at, okay, well, I was just in my active addiction, so whatever happened there is what happened there. Get out of jail free card. Nah. Again, what we've talked about, the things we do in our active addiction do not define us. We are not our actions. But just because we're not our actions doesn't mean that we don't have to still clean up our wreckage. Just because we aren't doing those things anymore doesn't mean that we just get a get out of jail free card. Again, this is an action step, a major action step. That is what we do here. And especially what we do going into step 9. But one of the most difficult things for me to do when I was coming up with my list, one of the most difficult things to do was to separate what I did versus what was done to me. To find those people that I owe amends to when they owe me an amends. You know, there was that ego, there was that pride that would come up and be like, yeah, well, you know, they owe me an amends, so I'm not giving them amends, so they owe me an amends. And that's not what we do. We have to separate what we did from what was done to us. We have to separate saying, okay, yeah, well, I only stole because, you know, I got fired from my job. So, no, we don't look at the things that we did because of. We look at what we did. The word because or any other rationalization term that we might use to justify, to try to let us off the hook a little bit, no. If we do that, we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to our step work. Because we aren't looking at ways to rationalize. We don't need to do that anymore. We worked our 6th step. We've walked away from the character defect of rationalization. We've walked away from trying to justify everything. We've gained acceptance for who we are, and we've taken responsibility within the 4th step. So now this is the ultimate ability for us to take more responsibility. That's literally what the 8th and 9th step do. And we can no longer live in denial. We can no longer live in denial about the damage we have done. And that was difficult for me. That was difficult for me because, like I said, you know, so much of especially in my early addiction was this thought of I'm only harming myself. It doesn't affect anybody else. It doesn't have any impact on anybody else. But when we actually take a deep look and do a deep dive into our actions, we start to see that we probably harmed a lot more people than we realized. So we add those things. We add those people. You know, we add those people. And some of them are going to be difficult because, like I said, when it got to the end of my active addiction, literally everybody I came in contact with could have potentially been on my amends list. Literally. From when I would wake up in the morning to going to Walmart to heading to the hood, to everybody. Everybody could have been on my amends list. So it's important to look at the ones that really matter. I don't want to say matter the most, but carry the most impact. You know, putting certain people on my, I actually did put certain people. I put my old drug dealer on my amends list. I put multiple of my old drug dealers on my amends list. I definitely put Walmart on my amends list, and Home Depot, and Lowe's, and Ace, and yeah, there were a bunch. And I listed each one of those, and I listed anybody that I thought I did harm to. Because for me, it was better to err on the side of too many rather than not enough. But the thing is that even if it's not enough, the process of working steps means that we will get to that, you know, person on the next one, because this is an ongoing process. This is a lifelong process. And we'll especially get to that when we start talking about the future steps on future episodes here. Because we don't just make an amends one time and then be done. We don't just make a list one time and then just be done. We keep going, and we keep building, and we keep, you know, adding names as we sadly do things. And one of the most interesting things about this list, and it's a common thing within addicts. It's not just a me thing. It's not just a, you know, whoever's listening this you thing. It's a common thing that even for an addict like me, who was constantly on that, I only harmed myself, I didn't harm anybody else, I didn't harm anybody else, I just harmed myself, I was one of the absolute lowest last people on that list. I was one of the last people on that list. Because when I came into the program, I didn't realize how little I valued myself. I didn't realize how low I considered myself. From self-esteem, from self-worth. It wasn't until I actually worked through this step that it became so clear how low my perspective on myself truly was. And that's why so often, for so many of us, self will be one of the absolute last things on our list. But thankfully, by working through this step and having that realization and having that understanding, we're able to raise ourselves up a little bit. So maybe next time on my 8th step, maybe I'll be a little bit higher. Even though maybe I haven't been harming myself. That's not true. I've been eating way too much pizza, so I will probably end up on my next 8th step, whenever that is. But I digress. So like I said, it's always better to err, on the side of too many names. Beautiful thing is that we don't do this on our own. We do this with a sponsor. So once we put together this list, we will talk to our sponsor about certain names that we might have had difficulty with, certain names that we might have been confused about, certain names that, do I really, I literally asked my sponsor, I'm like, do I really need to list every single place I've ever stolen anything from? Because we're going to be here for a while. And he said, no, we're just going to put one larger retail businesses on there. Like, okay, cool. Like, do I really need to list every single person that I've ever ripped off, whether it be from drugs, whether it be from, claiming that something weighed less than it did? He said, no, we're just going to put one thing for that. So again, having a sponsor will help you work through these questions that will arise to figure out who really needs to be on the list. And even people that are on the list, as we'll get to next week, just because somebody's on the list doesn't mean that they're going to get an amends, because some people, it might be dangerous to yourself or them to give that amends. So we'll get into that a lot more next week when we're really putting, the practice of making amends. Right now, like I said, all this step says is make a list, become willing. That's it. We aren't looking at anything else. That is it. So, we really, like I said before, we're never truly finished, because there's always those opportunities for other situations to arise as we get more clear-headed, as, we start truly living clean. Things might pop up that we didn't even realize. I had that literal thing happen to me. I thought of a situation with almost 2 years clean that I had not thought about in 7 years. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, he probably would have been on my list then. Well, could put him on my next one. And it's just, that's how things happen in recovery. That's how our memories work at times. So again, this is an ongoing process. But I will say, we aren't just looking at things from our active addiction. Because, as I said, we're human, and we will make mistakes in recovery. So we will look at everything that is that has occurred in our lives up to this point. And then we'll look at it on the next one. And I will say, one of the hardest things within recovery is adding names to the list of people that you've harmed in recovery. For me personally, that is something that it's like it hits different. It's like it hits different. And even though we can't, just use the excuse of, I was loaded before, so, whatever happened, it happened. Even though we can't use that as an excuse, it still seems kind of like it cushions the blow a little bit. Because when we do harm in recovery, when we do harm when we're clean, when we have to put names on a list and we don't have that cushion, it hits different. It really hits different. It brings a sense of pain that is unlike the pain or of realization of things that we did in active addiction. For me personally, again, experience, strength, and hope. A little bit of my opinion. Here's my opinion point for me personally, and that's something that we'll get into when it comes to making amends, and when it comes to things like that. And that's a whole different thing. And it really can be difficult. I'll admit that. It can really, really be difficult, because it forces us to acknowledge our humility. It forces us to acknowledge that we aren't perfect. It forces us to acknowledge that we're human. And I remember the first time that I really did harm to somebody in recovery. I mean, I still remember it so intently. I still remember it so much, and it still is something I don't feel shame regarding it. But but I still am working through guilt regarding it. It's still something that comes up within me because I knew better, but I didn't do better. But that's okay. Even when it doesn't feel okay to me, that's okay because I am an addict in recovery. I am human. I'm not perfect, and I never will be. So that's something we'll go into that a little bit more the next episode. One thing that I love, it says here in the literature, it says, the 8th step is doing the legwork to repair the wreckage of our lives. It's doing the legwork. It's putting out the blueprint of what we need to do to clean up our side of the street. It's putting out what we need to do to feel better about ourselves. It offers us this chance to no longer be living a life dominated by shame or guilt or remorse. It allows us to walk through. So once we have our list, all right, got the list, halfway done. Now what do? Now we got to really rely on that higher power. Now we really got to rely on that higher power and pray for willingness. And this could be done many different ways. It can literally, for myself personally, when I was working my 8th step, I made a conscious decision each day, each morning and each night when I was praying to ask my higher power for willingness for a couple specific people that were on my list. And it doesn't come overnight, especially the ones on the list that you feel or that I felt I was wronged by. I'm perfectly fine admitting and apologizing and making an amends and making something right. But when I feel like I deserve something, when that selfish ego comes out, yeah, there was a lot of willingness that needed to be prayed for a lot of nights. And again, why this is a continuous thing. And it's why we need to have some type of spiritual connection. We need to have some type of contact with our power greater than ourselves, because we're going to be relying on that power for help, for strength, for guidance, for willingness. You know, and faith, that fear piece we talked about earlier turns into faith. And we show that faith, showing that, you know, that through gaining that faith, we have the strength. We have the courage to walk through this. We have the courage to even put somebody on our list, let alone walk through the amends process. But it's not an overnight thing. It's not an overnight thing, and it takes effort, and it takes work, and it takes talking to other addicts, and it takes talking to your sponsor. It's so important that we work the steps in order so that when we get to this point, we aren't just going in blindly. We have that feeling of faith. We have that connection. We have people who care and love and want to help so that we can get the help we need for this step, because this step requires a lot of work. I'll say that. You know, and one of the beautiful things within, and it says in our literatures, is once we realize our need to be forgiven, we tend to be more forgiving. So again, it speaks to what we said earlier, where it shows everybody is equal. Because it's very difficult to sit there, you know, judging or blaming somebody else if we're really looking at who we are inside. It's very difficult to make those kind of assumptions about somebody if we're really focusing on what's inside of us. And again, especially in 2021 in the world we live in and how crazy things are, that's not always easy. I hop on the judge bus sometimes. Thankfully, I don't go too far on it, but it happens because I'm human. Simple as that. Because I'm human. So once we are able to be more forgiving, that opens up, you know, having that unconditional commonality within us. And one of my favorite lines from the 8-step reading, it says, we want to look the world in the eye with neither aggressiveness or fear. My sponsor always shares this. And then he'll like eyeball everybody around the room. You know, I can look everybody in the eye. I love that. I love it. I remember the first time he did that to me, I was like, whoa. I didn't like it too much then, but now I've come to appreciate it. Most of the things about my sponsor, I didn't like at first, but I really appreciate them now. Because that is the end goal of this. Is we don't want to, if we see somebody from our past that we owe an amends to and we haven't given that amends to, we don't want to look at them with fear. We don't want to look at somebody who maybe did us wrong, so we did them wrong, and we owe them an amends to be able to even that playing field. We don't want to see them get heated. We don't want to go back to those thought processes. And by working this step, we're able to look the world in the eye with neither aggressiveness nor fear. We're able to look the world in the eye as it is from a spiritual principle of humility. So the 8th step really lays the groundwork for next week. Next week, we're going to be hitting the 9th step and going to be talking about the process of making amends, what an amends really is, what it isn't, and the planning that can go into it for it all to go out the window in 1 second. So we got some fun stories for that next week. So that's what we got for this week of R&D, and hope everybody took something out of that for the 8th step. It is a major action step. It is a lot of difficulty. It is a lot of stress, but it is beautiful. So now we're going to head to our next segment of the show, my favorite moment of the week. But first, I need a bang break, so I got to get a little sip here. All right. Hopefully one day we will be sponsored by Bang Energy Drinks. I literally drink so many of them, we probably should be. But now we're going to get into our next moment of the week, which is called my favorite moment of the week. This is the part of the show where we talk about something that's happened over the last week. And it could be something from news, social media, pop culture, sports, entertainment. It might just be my favorite moment, my favorite meme off of Instagram. This is just the time, again, as I talk about experience, strength, and hope with some opinion. This is that opinion part. This is not tied into anything else. This is just my opinion of my favorite moment of the week. Also, I have to apologize. I'm a little under the weather. I got a cold last week, and so if my voice sounds a little nasally, I do apologize. So we're gonna hopefully be able to make it through the rest of the show without having to cough. That's what we're aiming for. It's not the Rona, promise. But yes, I've had a little bit of a cold. So we do this kind of as a week wrap up. Unless there's been one major thing, we kind of go through things as a little bit of a weekly wrap up and then talk about what my favorite moment is. So first off, got to give a shout out to myself because as of this past week, I am officially 1 year off of vaping. Anybody who knows me knows that I used to be sucking on that thing like a porn star. I would fall asleep with the vape in my hand. I would wake up with the vape in my hand. It was a problem. It was very much a problem. And thankfully, it's been a year. Next goal is to be completely off of nicotine. I had been, and then I fell back, but that's next on the goal. So shout out to me for that. Also, I have to give a huge shout out to Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Again, this is not a Marvel podcast, but I love Marvel so much. And the last episode was incredible, and it brought up the potential for X-Men, and it was awesome.
That part.
So, also, have to say, I went and got my first vaccine shot. So, in 3 weeks, I will officially be vaccinated. It ended up, I needed to drive up to Camp Verde to get it. So, it was close. Got the Pfizer. Felt absolutely nothing. Thought that maybe I had a little bit of shoulder pain the next day, but then realized I had the shoulder pain on both sides, and I'd worked out the previous day on shoulders. So I felt nothing. Obviously, I know most people say you feel more after the second dose, so we'll find out in a couple more weeks, but pretty happy about that. I'm halfway done, at this point. Gotta also say, shout out, congratulations, Baylor, for winning the NCAA, March Madness. Though that game was such a letdown, especially after how the UCLA-Gonzaga game ended. Absolutely legendary ending. I don't care what Skip Bayless says. $8 million a year, getting paid to be a troll, I swear. Whatever. But that was fire. Also, on a more somber note, got to give prayers to DMX. He's one of us. Addiction strikes everybody. It doesn't discriminate by race, by profession, by education, by monetary value, by, how well you go. Arr, arr. I love DMX. His music is, I will always say, It's Dark and Hell is Hot is one of the best albums in hip hop history. I remember riding my Mongoose bike down to Target to buy that. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite albums. So I really hope he can get better. I know it's really, really, really looking bleak, but I really can, I'm praying he can get better. He can get some help, because at the end of the day, regardless of what he's done in his personal life or any of the other outside things, he's still a human being, and he's still a human being suffering with a lifelong addiction. And, that's one of the things about this podcast, is that we're here to show that there is an easier way. We don't have to live like that anymore, so really hope we can get some help. But that leads us to what we're going to talk about. And I have to preface this by saying it's a little, I almost didn't want to do this segment, simply because today we're going to be, my favorite moment of the week is a TikToker. And I know there are people out there listening right now who just went, did Matthew just say his favorite moment of the week was a TikToker? Yes, I did.
That part.
I'm not exactly happy about it, but I did. So we're going to get into who my favorite moment was. And this isn't really there wasn't one specific moment. I just wanted to give a shout out to this dude for putting out incredibly positive, uplifting, beneficial content that has really helped. On some days, there are days that I listen to, I'm just like, let's go. We're going to get into that in a second. But first, we're going to talk about why I hate TikTok. Okay. Now, this might be a little bit of old man on the porch, get off my lawn, kids, coming out right now. I don't know. But TikTok is ridiculous. I don't see the appeal of it. I do not understand what the benefit of it truly is, when you could pretty much already do everything that is in there on either Snapchat or Instagram. I don't understand why we needed it. So even if we take out all of the, potential privacy, problems, I didn't care about any of that because I don't use TikTok. So it didn't matter to me when everybody was losing their minds because, supposedly China was stealing all of our TikTok information. I didn't care because it had nothing to do with me. But there are elements of TikTok that I've always said it, I'll say it again. You will see my videos on Pornhub before you see my videos on TikTok. Even though I've been getting a lot of people telling me that TikTok has some really positive things. And even though I will admit that thankfully all of the good TikToks are reposted on Instagram, or they are sent directly to me by Alex and Kate. Shout out to both y'all. Thank you for that. So yes, I know there are people out there saying, Matthew, you're actually watching TikTok. Okay, I will watch a TikTok. I will never be making TikToks. Right here, right now, April 6th, I'm saying it. Little point of reference, I also said that I would never be on Snapchat, and now I am a Snap hoe. So,
That part.
more will be revealed, as they say. But my other issues with TikTok is it's just I don't really get why Bella Porch is a thing. Why is going for anybody who didn't see me, I was just imitating that and then going, frink. That's the sword sliding out. Why is that a thing? Why do millions of people want to see that? How is going, how's that a dance? How's that a thing? And again, maybe this is, old man sitting on the porch, get off my lawn. I don't know. But how's that a thing? And then it leads into other things that really kind of get me questioning TikTok. Is those elements of whenever a new dance comes up, the WAP dance or the silhouette challenge or the bunny ears challenge or the, big bank challenge. I enjoy beautiful women, obviously. I enjoy people's ability to, express themselves how they want to. But how is it not directly sexualizing underage people when you've got teenagers barely, out of adolescence doing the big bank challenge? then I'm just like, I don't even want to get on. I don't even want to look at this. Like when those are posted on Instagram anymore, if I see anything that involves potential sexualization of somebody that's potentially younger than should be looked at on the internet, I just scroll. Just scroll, scroll, scroll. Chris Hansen ain't coming after me. Not today. So again, I got issues with TikTok. I don't like TikTok. But TikTok does have some fire. TikTok has some fire, has some great Marvel content, apparently has some great recovery content, has some really funny stuff. And one of the best things on TikTok, and if you are on TikTok, I implore you, please go out and follow this man. Please give him some views. Help him out. And I'm speaking of angry reactions. If you aren't familiar with angry reactions, go get familiar with him. He is one of the angriest, happy individuals I've ever seen. I have never been screamed at that I am beautiful, that I'm gorgeous, as I have from this individual. I'm speaking of 22-year-old Onea Johnson from Jacksonville, Mississippi originally. He's a comedian. He had a page also called Face Only a Mother Could Love. And he has a very aggressive resting face. You know, there's like, you know, resting bitch face is a thing. He has resting angry face. And there is a picture of a bulldog out there. It's just the cutest little bulldog wearing a raincoat. And he does a reaction to that, and it is one of the greatest things I've ever seen, honestly. It is incredible. So this is a dude who got instant viral status by defending somebody's cake decorating on TikTok. Somebody's being mean to a 7-year-old about decorated cake. He was right there. He was right there telling this person that they did a good job. Aggressively congratulating, aggressively complimenting. And I don't mean aggressively like over the, like creepily. I mean like angrily, aggressively. And it is amazing. And watching his reactions to all kinds of things and seeing how it's grown. Again, it's one of those things about the internet that I love and is also ridiculous, is watching the growth from this dude who literally is just doing side-by-side TikTok videos to now people are such fans of his that they're sending like custom rugs, custom dolls, paintings, string art, cakes, hairdos. He's a hairdo. His video on that was amazing. I mean, sculptures. People are getting tattoos with this dude. And watching his reaction and watching him, you know, be an uplifting, positive person. And it's fun because it's so not what you would expect. Because the expectation even admits to it. He goes, his quote, he even said, he goes, I basically took how the world sees me and how I really am and just matched it together. If I passed you on the street and I didn't say a word, I look like the angriest person on the planet. But when you actually get to know me, I'm actually a really positive person. And it's so true, and I love that because he's wanting to take something that would be this negative perception that as human beings we inherently do, even when we aren't trying to, and he turns it into a positive. He turns it into a positive, and some of his shit is so uplifting. I love it. I love it so much. And the other thing I love about it is that this dude went viral while being homeless in his car. He was literally homeless in Indiana, and he blew up. He just blew up, completely blew up, to the point that he got like millions of viewers, millions of followers in the span of 24 hours. He currently is either living with or constantly over at the D'Amelio's family's house. Again, if you know anything about the internet, I don't care about TikTok, power people, whatever. But the D'Amelios are like pretty much the TikTok royalty, I guess, from what I know of it. And I refuse to do more research into them. I did some research last night into him, but I refuse to do research into them because fuck TikTok.
That part.
But he's literally gone from being homeless to now essentially in like the royalty, if you will, of TikTok, which just that sentence alone sounds so dumb. Sorry, inner, old man on porch coming out there. But it speaks to just the craziness of the internet. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about this before, that it's sometimes I hate the internet for it. I hate the fact that, people can become multimillionaires by fronting and pretending that they're, driving a Ferrari, or can just live off of a lie. But this is an opportunity where something positive actually came out of it. And something positive actually is coming out of it. And the fact that it's a positive thing, because so much on the internet is from a negative perspective. It's from an unspiritual perspective. It's from a perspective that's just gross. Spiritually, visually, physically, a lot of times. The things that are most popular are the things that are just the most basic. Like the people who are most popular are the people who are the hottest, or the people who drive the nicest cars, or the people who show the most money. But why can't we change it to where the people who are most popular are the dude who was homeless, who is not the most picturesque, most standardly considered attractive individual? Like, why can't we do that? So I am asking everybody that's out there to please go check him out. Please go throw him a like, throw him a follow. I'm going to send this to him just to let him know that he is appreciated and he's gorgeous, as he says. And I'm sorry, we got to get him something. He's got to do something. Because if Dogface can get a commercial at the Super Bowl for drinking ocean spray, granted it was a TikTok commercial, but still, commercial at the Super Bowl. If Salt Bae can be seductively feeding Conor McGregor slices of steak, if Nyan Cat, fucking Nyan Cat, can sell as artwork for $637,000. Angry Reaction guy's got to get something. He's got to get something. Like, I'm gonna go buy one of his shirts. We're gonna rock it on one of these episodes because I love it. I think he's amazing. If I had him yelling words of affirmation at me every day, I don't even know what I'd be capable of. All right, that's what I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that. I'm just gonna have a go-to that every morning I wake up and just get yelled at that I'm beautiful and I'm enough and I'm amazing and let's go. Then watch out, world, because I'm coming for you. Oof.
Phrasing.
That part. So that was my favorite moment of the week. Again, it wasn't an actual direct moment, but it was a collection of moments there that continuously boosted my week. So that's what we got for that. And next up, we're going to get into our next segment.
It's time to Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right. We are back for our next segment, Ask an Addict. This is the part of the show where we ask different viewers or listeners questions. Again, I am an addict, so I am the addict that is being asked. If you have a question that you would like to have answered on air, please send it over to Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. Or when you're on the website, you can just contact us directly, send it over, send it through social media. And this does not need to be recovery questions. This can be questions about anything. I like answering questions. So if you have a question that you're curious of, just ask me and maybe I'll answer it. Again, a couple of these questions here are just random, and I like that. So if you have a question, send it over. We'll answer it on air. So first question I got was, what does being of service mean? So being of service is something that you hear constantly in the rooms. We talk about the 5 things that everybody suggested to do. You know, it's go to meetings, it's get a home group, it's get a sponsor, it's work steps, and it's be of service. And the reason why that is so important is because, as it says, we only keep what we have by giving it away. And how we give it away is by being of service. And service can be at all different levels. You know, there are things called service positions where, you know, it might be something, you're a greeter. Prior to COVID, that was a thing, you know, and you stood at the door and everybody that came in, you offered them a hug. You could be some meetings that have coffee. You could be the coffee cleaner-upper. You could be the person who helps stack chairs. Those are all the ways that we can be of service from a very, very basic level. And that continues up as you go higher. You can be of service at a meeting level. You can help chair a meeting or help give out key tags or even simply reading one of the readings before the meeting starts. Simply doing that is being of service. You know, one of the ways that we be of service is when we carry and share the message. So in a way, just talking about recovery is being of service, because if we're being of service to the overall fellowship as a whole, and that goes all the way up. There's different service positions for all kinds of different things within whether you want to be at the meeting level, at an area level, at a regional level, at a world level. There are all kinds of different service opportunities, and I am, as a lot of people say, I'm a service junkie. I love being of service. I love being involved with different subcommittees, different I'm part of public relations or part of H&I, or different things where we're able to really help. And that's me. I love being of service. But if you aren't wanting to be of service on some crazy level, there are plenty of other ways. And I will always try to be of service, because, as I said, those same 5 things that I was told my first meeting are the same 5 things that I do today. And just for today, it's been working, for the last over 3+ years. So that's what being of service truly is. It's about giving away what was so freely given to us. It's about bettering the fellowship. It's about bettering recovery, and doing it however we can. So everybody isn't going to be out there running world conventions, and that's fine. There's positions in service for anybody and everybody that wants to be in service. So yeah, if you're interested in being of service, please contact me off of this perspective here, off of the podcast, because we're always looking for people to be of service. So if you are interested, please let me know. Next question is, what is my favorite sport? Yes, I talk a lot about sports on this podcast. We talk a lot about, what I like watching, different things like that. And I would say my favorite sport to play was probably basketball growing up. Basketball and baseball growing up, because I was pretty good at both of them. I was very tall, very young, and then I kind of just stopped growing, and then it kind of just, all of my NBA dreams went out the window when I stopped growing at 6'2". But I was always really good at it up to that point, because I was a big dude. I played a power forward, throw me the ball down there, cool, got it. I was also really good at baseball up until people started throwing the ball about 60+ miles an hour, and then I wasn't very good anymore. So I peaked very early in my basketball and my baseball career, I got to say. Another one that I absolutely love being, participating in is I loved training mixed martial arts. I loved Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I loved training Muay Thai. Those are still 2 things I really loved doing, and I would absolutely have loved to be able to get back into. Sadly, we assume it was because of the Jiu-Jitsu. I ended up having to have a very serious back surgery about 10 years ago. We don't know for sure that it was because of Jiu-Jitsu, but because I have spinal stenosis, congenital canal stenosis, degenerative disc disease, and a bunch of other stuff, I'm not willing to find out. But those would probably be my favorites. I also really like playing rugby. I played rugby for a semester when I was living overseas in England, and it was a lot of fun. But to watch, I would probably have to say football, just because, having such a short season, each game matters so much. I would probably have to say football or Formula One. I love Formula One racing. I just love it. The technology that's involved within these absolute massive beasts of a machine, I absolutely love. But really, when it comes to watching sports, I'll watch pretty much anything. Thanks to COVID, I can say that during that time, I watched e-gaming. I watched competitive darts. I watched tons of golf. I watched competitive axe throwing. That was interesting. I watched things that I didn't know I could watch, and I can't say I love them, but they were sports. At least they were on ESPN, so it was something in the beginning of COVID to get me through the beginning of COVID. So that, for me, I love all sports. I don't really care about baseball until after the All-Star game. Too many games, personally. Basketball, I care about a little bit earlier. But football, it's just so locked in. Any given Sunday, anything can happen. So, it's so locked in every single week. I would say that and MMA are my two favorite things to watch. I will just binge watch MMA. I mean, again, benefit of the pandemic, there were tons of events that were constantly on. So, that was something that I was constantly watching. Because it's fun having, actually done jujitsu and Muay Thai. For me, jujitsu is like a game of chess in a lot of ways. It's like if I move this here and then he counters here and then I do this here. To me, that's really exciting. That's really exciting seeing how things progress. So I really enjoy that. And I'm not saying I was ever very good, and there's obviously tons of things that I miss while watching, but having a little bit more idea of, how the sausage is made, if you will, it makes it more interesting to me. So that's my favorite sport, because obviously, there's no way I could ever just pick one. I love sports way too much. Sports are one of my absolute favorite things and have been since I was a very little kid. So next question. And this is an interesting question. And this is a question that, I again, this is 100% my opinion. We are not talking about things, specifically based on recovery, whatever. But one of the things that I've gotten questions about, like especially when I was working out a lot. Prior to COVID, I was going to the gym 6 days a week. And had been for a while, and was starting to get a little bit, and felt pretty good about the weights I was putting up and all that. And one of the things that I've gotten asked a bunch is about steroids, anabolic steroids in recovery. And again, I'm not judging, I'm not judging, I'm just stating my opinion on this topic. And people have asked, have you cycled? And I have never, up to this point, just for today, I have never taken any kind of anabolic or illegal substance. And that's not because I'm opposed to them. I'm not saying it like, oh no, I'm clean. I'm 100%, all natty baby. Oh yeah. I'm not saying it like that. All I'm saying is just my truth. I've never even taken clenbuterol. The hardest thing I've put in my body is having a pre-workout that has 1.3 dimethylamine in it. Which is technically an illegal substance depending on the state governing sports body, whatever. But I've never injected any kind of substance. I've never, taken any kind of pills that are anabolic or, even diuretics or anything like that. I personally never have. And I know a lot of people that I have. I am not speaking like, oh, I would never do steroids, because I bought an entire cycle. I had an entire cycle of D-ball, test either cypionate or propionate. I mean, I had everything I needed. I had some Deca, and I was going to take them. I had no issue with it. The problem is that I couldn't stop using drugs. And for whatever reason in my mind, I had this fear that I couldn't take steroids while still using opiates, or else it would have some type of negative effect. I was okay with mixing certain drugs. It was really weird. Some drugs I would never mix. I would never mix alcohol with opiates. But then there were other drugs that I had no issue mixing, and mixed for years. It's quite weird. But for whatever reason in my mind, mixing steroids into the mix was something I wouldn't do. So again, I'm not saying I'm not casting judgment on anybody out there if you use steroids. Personally, I don't see them as that big of a thing. If you are a safe, healthy person who wants to increase your natural testosterone, you can either do it anabolically, or you can go to a doctor for low testosterone and do it anabolically. It's the exact same thing. So there's a lot of misinformation about steroids. I'm not telling you to do steroids. I'm not telling you to do steroids. All I'm doing is just stating my opinion, how it ties into recovery. So when I first came into the program, and my thought was, you know what, I'm not going to, I probably still have that bottle of D-ball around here somewhere, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, and once I get 2 years, I'll look at it. That was my thought process. My thought process was I'll talk to my sponsor on it, because technically I know a lot of people in recovery that use anabolic steroids, not from a doctor, and consider themselves in recovery. I know people, that consider themselves completely clean, because they are, and they are getting testosterone replacement therapy injections because they have low testosterone, which a lot of us addicts do from years of abusing our bodies. So it's one of those things that like I've thought about a lot, and I've thought about putting the research into it and going to a doctor and seeing where my testosterone levels are and seeing if that would be something that maybe I need because I'm getting older. And at the end of the day, like maybe it's something beneficial and maybe it would help me finally look like Channing Tatum. But just for today, I personally don't have this a part of my recovery. Because at the end of the day, I am putting a mind-altering or mood-changing substance into my body. And even though most of the things you hear about roid rage aren't real, most of the things you hear about, the way that they're portrayed in the media aren't honest or fact-based at all. And I speak to that being around a lot of people in my life that have used some type of anabolic steroid in their day. Even though those aren't true, it's still a fact that adding more testosterone into my body is going to have a change on my mood. So just for today, where I'm at in my recovery, it's not a necessary thing. And I'm not saying anybody who is using or isn't using is or isn't in recovery or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying my perspective on it personally is that I'm not going to just for today. We'll see what happens in the future. Maybe if, I go to a doctor and find out that I have super duper low testosterone, maybe that's something we'll cross that bridge. But it's going to be after having a conversation with my sponsor, after having a conversation with people in the rooms of recovery who maybe have gone through the same thing. It's going to be after I've looked at all of the different sides of it, more than simply just the ego element of I'm sick of not having a six-pack. I want to be big like Channing Tatum and Magic Mike. Let's do that. If there's a genuine need for it from a medical perspective, then as it says in our literature, in times of need, things like that are totally fine to be doing and, being clean. So that's something that it's funny. This question's been on my list for weeks because this is something that I'd been asked multiple times, especially when I was lifting a lot. Not that I'm like big, but when you go to the gym 6 days a week, people at the gym see you a lot and they kind of automatically assume that you're on juice because they are. So I don't know. That's just something that I thought was interesting to kind of discuss. And again, mostly there's my opinion. So please don't take any of that to heart or judgment, anything like that, because that's not what we were doing. Just answering questions. So again, that's what we got for today's Ask an Addict segment. If you are curious about what my answer would be to one of your questions, please send them over. I love answering questions, so send me your questions. So next segment, it is time for some clean time shout outs. And we got a bunch today. I'm telling you right now, I better be locked and loaded like Betamax status because we are going off today. So first up, before we get into it, to let everybody know, this is a segment of the show where we give shout outs for continuous clean time, for different milestones that are recognized within the fellowship. So this is for people who have a newcomer, which is anything up to 29 days clean. Then we recognize 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 year, 18 months, and multiple years clean. But we also want to give shout outs for kind of big numbers. So if you get 500 days, 1,000 days, 100 days, send us over a message at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, and we will give you a shout out on air. So first up, with 60 days clean, we've got B. Good job, B. Next up, with 6 months, we got Justin. There you go. Any addict, brother. Next up, with 6 months, we've got Oldies. And with 6 months, we've got Mike. I didn't want to lump you guys together. I want you each to have your individual celebration there. So shout out to both y'all. Next up, with 1 year clean, we've got Jess. Boom. And then with 2 years clean, we've got Sage. Boop, boop. Then coming in with 5 years clean, we've got Tiffany. Boop, 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 boop. Then with 6 years clean, we've got Blaine. Boop, 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 boop. Whew, reload. And then next up, we've got Bruce with 13 years clean. That baker's dozen. Boop, 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 boop. And then finally, we got to really just strap in for this one. With 25 years clean, we got my sponsee sister. Shout out to you from New Jersey, Edie, 25 years. Boop, 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 7 Whew. Well, one more. I think that was 25. I lost count. I did not have the capacity, the mag capacity for that one. Shout out to everybody for your clean time. That's what we do. We got to celebrate it. We got to have fun in recovery and give celebration, because every single day clean is a successful day and a miracle for addicts. Every single day is a miracle. So if you're sitting out there with 1 day, send me a message. If you're sitting out there with 2 days, send me a message. All I want to do is help get people excited about what we're doing here. 1 day at a time. That's how we all did it. So even Edie sitting there with 25 years. She was there with 1 day as well. So every single day that we have is a miracle. So shout out to everybody. Congratulations if you got a clean time shout out today. If you didn't, guess what? Don't use, and send me a message when you do, and you will, and we'll give you a shout out on air. So I got to say thank you, everybody. I got love for everybody here. Even if I don't know you, if nobody's told you this today, I love you, each and every one of you. Thank you for helping me, in my recovery. Thank you for being here as part of this journey. I'm really excited to be able to connect with people and to continue carrying the message of recovery to everybody, to addicts, to non-addicts. It's a beautiful thing, and I couldn't have done it without you guys. But we are officially out of time for today. Great show. Thank you for being here for episode 8. Of course, we will be here every single Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time, live on YouTube, as well as episodes wherever you consume your podcast the next day. Got to give a huge thank you again to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily, as well as our music for the episode, Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland. Shout out Mad Decent Records for allowing us to use anything. And I will see you all next week. Love you guys.
I just wanna feel